Good morning. I was asked to talk about how different practical ways of creating Bishul Yisroel. I'm happy to hear that you're learning about passing Bishul Yisroel. So I'm going to talk about some ways. I hope that I'm going to meet your needs. I'll do what I can. I'm going to divide my talk into, depending on time-wise, into three parts. First is about creating Bishul or Pas Yisroel in a factory. For these purposes, we're going to consider everything just lumped together. We'll call it all Bishul Yisroel in a factory. Second is in a what we call food service, like a restaurant type setting. And last is a home setting. Okay? Each one of them has their own, quirks. There's a certain amount of overlap, but they each have their own ways of doing things. Okay. To talk about, we'll talk first about in a factory, and on that, there's a Ramah in Halacha, in Kofir Beis Halacha test. The Ramah says, "Im nafach be'esh, have kichitui." The Ramah says that if a yid blows on the fire that was lit by the guy, that's like a chitui in the gechol, and that makes it the food be Bishul Yisroel. Okay, in this case, Pas Yisroel, but it makes it Bishul Yisroel. Okay, this Ramah comes from, it's really from a Maril. That the Maril talks about whether blowing should be considered that it's considered the yid was machata in the gechol, and the Maril brings a raya from the din of Kashrus that the Gemara talks about that blowing on something is considered like your action, and therefore you see that if I blow on something that's considered like I did it, so too for Bishul Yisroel, if I blow on it, it's considered that I did it also. Okay, now just hear what we just said over here. The yid we're saying is we need a raya that the fact that the yid blew on it makes it Bishul Yisroel. Had the yid just, if we wouldn't have this raya, this Gemara about service, we'd say, well, maybe if I blew on it, maybe that's not considered Bishul Yisroel. Okay, and from there we already get an inkling that the Jew has to do something that somehow connects what he did to the creation of the fire in some kind of a direct connection, and therefore you would consider that maybe blowing is not enough of a connection. Maybe if I blew, that's not considered that even though I blow and then the fire, it fans the flame, but somehow you would think that that's not. We need a raya that is so. So therefore, that's the reason that I believe that's the reason why people do not accept setting of a timer as something that creates Bishul Yisroel. Okay, we've heard that suggestion many times. They say, look, it's not realistic for the rabbi to come to the restaurant or to the factory to turn on the fires. Okay, what we'll do, every morning at 6 a.m. the fires have to go on. Let the mashgiach, let the rabbi be the one to set that timer, and since he set the timer, he made it go off every day at 6 o'clock. That almost universally is not accepted as a way to create Bishul Yisroel, and I believe the reason is because of this thing. We need only things that directly connect to what the yid did create Bishul Yisroel. In this case, the yid blowing is considered his connection. But once we get to something where I set the timer so that in 6 hours from now the fires will go on, or it's that every day at 6 a.m. it's going to go on, that's considered too far removed from what I did, and that's not considered to make it Bishul Yisroel. It's not considered a result of my action.
So it's not so much a question of whether it's grama or not grama. You're saying it's just not enough direct involvement.
Well, I'm getting to grama in a second. That's where I'm heading to about grama. But I'm saying this is considered too far removed from me. The fact that I put on the timer, there's a coffee machine here. I could set the timer that tomorrow morning you're going to make coffee. It's too far removed from me.
Even though that's not a grama necessarily.
Even though whether it is or is not grama, it's not enough. We'll get into grama in a second from a different angle. But it's just too disconnected from blowing is also my action. But yet we need to have a raya that blowing is considered that I did it. Well, what do you mean? I blew it. I made it. I'm saying that I made it happen. So you might think that that's not. So it tells us that some things are just too, separated from the person. Maybe we'll understand better in a second why that should be even true. Okay. Now, this whole din that I'm telling you led to someone to ask a question. I don't know. Some of you may know him. I don't know if you know him. His name is Mordechai Cooper. I don't know if you know his name. He used to work for the OU many years ago. He still works for them, but he lives now in Eretz Yisrael. He does a very different job there. Anyhow, he asked the following question. The Gemara says in many places that something is only considered to be what we call a koyach gavra. It's only considered an action that a person did if it's a koyach rishon. Okay, the example that you probably know is if you have a dam, you have a pool full of water. Somebody pulls away the opening to allow the water to flow out of that pool. So what's the din? If the water in its first gush of water kills somebody, considered koyach rishon, is considered that the person who pulled away the plug or the stopper is chayev because he's the one who caused the person to be killed. If that first gush of water comes out, a later flow of water kills the person, then it's not koyach rishon, and therefore the person is not chayev for what he did. So the question is, so that means is only things that happen as a immediate result of what I did are considered my koyach. Things that happen as a secondary result of what I did are not considered to be my koyach. So that would mean is, what would happen if if the yid would blow on something, and that would then fan the flames? Okay, right now we're talking in a theoretical way. I would blow on one thing, and that would fan the flames to make the fire go higher. That would seem to be not Bishul Yisroel. That's only my koyach sheni. I'm not. If I blew directly on the flames, that's Bishul Yisroel. If I blow on something that blows on the flames, then that wouldn't be Bishul Yisroel. Okay, now that sounds very theoretical, but it has a very practical application.
Fan.
What?
Turning on a fan.
Well, so right, but turning on a fan is again, it's theoretical. Is how many people try to make Bishul Yisroel by turning on a fan? What kind of? Why would you be so silly as to do it? Why don't you just turn it on? Okay, but I'm going to give you the practical application, which is as follows. In companies, when companies want to be Bishul Yisroel, a very common way to make the company Bishul Yisroel is by turning on their boiler. Why do you turn on their boiler? In most companies, food is not cooked like in your house on a little fire or on a big fire. What they do is they have one central boiler. That boiler creates steam. That steam is piped all around the factory, and the steam is then used to cook. So, for argument's sake, instead of there being a fire under a pot, there's a steam line coming into that pipe to heat up the food. Okay, that's efficient, and that's the way most factories cook. It's very rare that you see an actual open flame. Yeah.
Is it normal to most factories cook that the steam goes onto the food directly, or it goes into
No,
the outside?
indirectly. Usually it's indirectly. Occasionally it's directly. Usually it's indirect. Like he's saying is that the food is in what's called a jacket. I mean, the pot has two walls to it, an inner wall and an outer wall, and the steam flows in between those inner and outer walls. So the steam, the pot is surrounded by steam, but there's no steam actually hitting the food. Okay, so in this case, so what the yid is going to make Bishul Yisroel is, look, there's 10 pots cooking around this factory. So what he does is he turns on the boiler, and by turning on the boiler, he's now creating steam for the whole factory. Okay, now, but if you ever watch someone turn on a boiler, you would find out that you go over and there's a big green button, and you push the button, it starts the boiler. No, it doesn't work like that. Okay, when you press the green button, first, 10 safety checks have to happen to the boiler first. First, it sucks out all the air out of it. Then it checks to make sure this is working and this is working. There's all kinds of things. So 2 minutes later, after you push that button, 2 minutes later, the boiler actually lights up. Okay? I don't know if a boiler in your house is as sophisticated, but in a big boiler in a plant, you don't just turn it on and hit the button, psh, it goes on. Okay? It does a lot of things in between. So when you push that button, it's not a direct result of my action that the fire goes on. Well, it's a result of my action, but it's not a Kashrus of my action. When I push the button, that sets in motion many different things. The last one of them is turn the boiler on. But it's setting in motion many different steps, and however minutes later, it finally turns it on. So, if in order to be considered my action, it has to be that I do something that directly, I blow on the fire, makes it light up. But if I would turn on the fan that blew the fire, that would not be. So then over here, that's what I do. I push the button, and a few minutes later it turns on. Not because there's a time delay, but it's because the thing goes through many steps before it gets there. So it does step 1 and 2 and 3, and after number 9, everything is in order. Then number 10 is it turns it on. So seemingly that should not be a koyach, and that should not be good enough. Okay, so this question is really, a question on the most, like I say, the most popular way of making something Bishul Yisroel is to turn on the boiler. What I didn't tell you, we'll get to it in a second, is one of the advantages of turning on the boiler is, in big companies, boilers just go on once, and they'll stay on for a whole year. Okay? The companies rarely turn their boilers off. It's quite boilers take a long time to start up. If they turn off, it's hours to get them back up and running again. For most companies, it's worthwhile to keep them running. They run straight the whole year. Okay? Now, they may, over Shabbos, put it on low, and if we have time, we'll get to that, but that's okay also. It maintains the Bishul Yisroel. And when they turn off the boiler, they don't turn off the boiler. One guy says, hey, guys, it's going to be July 4th, let's turn off the boiler. We're going to be down for 3 days. That's not what happens. When they turn off the boiler, it's a scheduled thing. The company knows in advance they're going to turn it off. When they turn it off, they have a week-long maintenance. The whole factory is down. It's a big to-do. So it's a good way to control Bishul Yisroel, because you light the boiler. If you make sure that it never goes off, then it's a way to keep Bishul Yisroel. And I say you make sure because we just had a situation where a company, their boiler stays on forever. We have a recording device on the boiler to make sure that it never cools off. Okay, we'll talk about it later about what kind of temperatures we use. We have a recording device. In walks the mashgiach and finds out that a few days beforehand, the thing had lost temperature for hours and hours. In other words, the boiler went off. It didn't go off because they chose to. The company wouldn't choose to, but it went off because they were doing construction in front of the factory, and somebody hit a pipe or cut a line, or something happened, and the boiler was off for a couple of hours. Okay, so even though in theory it's supposed to stay on forever, the mashgiach does need to make sure that it actually does. Okay, that was like that incident, and we're working on that. That shouldn't happen the next time. What I'm saying is, but it's a good plan because usually the boiler goes on and it stays on forever. The company doesn't think it's turning off. Yeah.
Does the company even realize the nafkamina vis-a-vis the...
most definitely. No.
It was just their oversight.
No, they have been instructed that if it goes down to call the rabbi, and part of what goes on is that there's a little show that goes on, which is that when the mashgiach walks in, he doesn't just quietly check to make sure that the boiler was still on. He makes a production out of sticking their data cards into his laptop and checking it and making sure that it is. So they remember, if it ever goes down, we have to call the rabbi. He makes a whole production. He's supposed to make a production out of it so that it's obvious that this is important and they shouldn't forget that there's such a thing. And in this case, the company, it was an oversight. However, it happened, and because of that, we're changing how we do it to get a more immediate notification rather than to know about it when the mashgiach shows up. Okay, but yes, they're supposed to know about it, and they do know about it, and the mashgiach sort of reminds them every time he comes that it's happening. Okay. So back to our question: how could it be that lighting the boiler is going to make the food Bishul Yisroel when lighting the boiler is only a Kashrus? Okay. So the answer to the question is, Rav Shechter gave two answers to the question. He wasn't talking about boilers. Okay. It's something he wrote for some other purposes, which we then use to answer this question. Okay. Looks like some people on this side are familiar with it. Okay. And he said like this. Rav Shechter said two different things, both of which answer this question. Okay. One is based on a Magen Avraham, who says like this. This that we have a difference between a koach rishon and a koach sheni is when there's some other force that is in play. In the case of the water that I gave you, there's 10,000 gallons of water sitting in a pool, and their own push, we'll call it gravity, whatever it is, their own push is what is flooding the person below it. And therefore, unless the person did a koach rishon, it doesn't connect to what that person did. But if a person takes something that was completely dormant and a machine that's completely off and non-functional, and he starts the whole process going, in that case, the person, he didn't just let the water out and let the water do its own thing. He didn't pull away something that let the water do its own thing. But he started the whole process going. That everyone holds that's considered connects to the person. So in our case, the boiler is sitting here laying dormant, or in Shechter's case, the tzitzis machine that's sitting there, they're just sitting there. It's not doing anything. It won't do anything until someone starts the machine up. So then the fact that the person hits the button, that wakes the machine up and gets it rolling, that's considered a koach rishon of the person. And therefore, that even if you need to have a person to do a koach rishon, in our case, make a Bishul Yisroel, since I push the button and get the boiler going, that's considered my action, and it is considered Bishul Yisroel. Okay, that's one answer. Go ahead.
But isn't that case with the boiler really, the electricity is what's keeping it going, and the only thing was that there was a switch that kept electricity from going, and now you're filling in the switch. So isn't that sort of like similar to if you have a river and then you have a dam, or like a break, where the water can't flow, and you take away the dam, so now the water's flowing. So really, it's not your action that's keeping it going; it's the water's action that's keeping it going. So this just seems to be very similar.
Okay, so I think I'm not sure. It's a fair question. I think that the answer to your question, I'm not sure what the answer is. I think the answer is this is a general principle for looking at things, particularly Kashrus things, right. But in general is we try to look at things in I know this is going to sound funny, in an unsophisticated, lay view of things. And what I mean is as follows. When you have a pool of water, it's obvious that by pulling it away, I didn't make the water go out. I didn't make the water come rushing down the hill. What the water's coming out of its own volition. I pulled out the thing, and the water just comes pouring down by itself. When I look at the electric switch, it's true that we know scientifically that what's going on, there's real electricity dying to get in there, right? And I'm moving away.
It's not true.
Okay, it's not true?
No, it's not true. It's not how electricity works. It's the misconception of how it works. It's only if the circuit is complete is electricity going to be going through in the first place. It's not that it's going and it's stopped waiting to jump once you close the circuit. That's a misconception.
There is an electrical circuit somewhere.
Yeah, but that's not how circuits
Okay,
work.
I don't even, the truth is I don't care. I really don't.
Right, I know, I
Because the
understand.
point is, what my answer is really is that it doesn't really depend, I know it's going to sound funny, it doesn't depend on the truth whether you're right or you're right, it depends on the perception. What does a layperson see when he looks at this machine? What does the layperson see? The layperson doesn't see anything but electrons flowing through. He knows that the machine is dead out there. When I hit the switch, I bring it to life. I'm the one who brings it to life. There isn't anything from the machine itself that has the appearance of it could do this by itself, as opposed to the water. When I pull the thing out, it's, to the layperson looking at it, of course, the water's flying out by itself. It's its own power sitting there that's waiting for it to come out. Okay, that's a general way of looking at things. That we try not to be too sophisticated. I'm saying, no, really. We try not to. The Torah doesn't expect us to know the truth. It expects us to deal with things based on their perception. Okay, if we were talking about worms and fish, this would be very relevant.
Right.
Okay. Now the another answer that Rosh Hashanah said from Chaim Soloveitchik is a second answer, which is this: that there's a rule that you need koyach rishon. This that we have koyach rishon is for very specific halachas. This that we said you have to have the water flowing out. It's a very specific halachas. The ones that I remember, or that I have written down, are shchita, netilas yadayim, and ritzicha. There's some very.
I think he said those are the only three.
Okay, the only three. So there's very specific ones. There are very specific ones that need a koyach rishon. Everything else is satisfied with it being just coming from a person. In Rabbi Shechter's word, it's called a ma'aseh adam. As long as it came from the person, that's good enough. So as long as we have, so in our case, blowing is considered enough. Pushing the button is surely what got the boiler going. That's considered the person did it. We don't need to have this special status of koyach rishon. Therefore, some very specific halachas have to have that. But for everything else, it's good enough to do. Okay. Now, I will tell you.
So why do you need the right for
blowing?
Yeah.
So why don't we say that the blowing is maybe the blowing, it should be obvious that the blowing relates to me.
Correct. I mean, if you don't need a koyach rishon, so obviously we know that the fire only got higher because my blowing.
I'm not sure what the answer is. I'm going to maybe answer the question in a second. I'm not sure. It's a fair
The right is froze, and that's not one of the three. That's
what do you think?
It's froze is Nezikin.
Right.
So we see that froze also needs a koyach rishon. See?
Nezikin.
I said the raya for nipuach. Then what? What's the raya? Was that should be considered koyach rishon?
No, just
What's the right?
just that it connects to me. That the fact that if I blow, that we should say that the blowing is like an extension of myself. That it's considered that I did it. You have to bring a right from church. So you're saying is once you tell me that you don't need to do a koyach rishon, you just have to have something that connects to the person. It should be obvious then that the blowing should be considered. I should need to have a right. What I started with. I should need to have a right that it
That's what I'm saying.
But I think it's not analogous because in the case of whatever situation that Rav Shefter is talking about, the dam, is you can pinpoint that there is a clear linkage at some point, even if it's a Rube Goldberg that goes through 50 steps, you can directly link your flipping the switch or your Maisa to that person's result. As opposed to in the case of blowing, the Chiddush is that something that kind of has to be translated through the air. Who says that the air that I blow, it relates to me? Maybe it's called the wind. There's no concrete connection. It's a fundamentally different question than this issue. This issue is about how do you define grama. But grama means that there is a maisa. You tell me if you think this makes sense. Grama is a maisa that you can clearly identify as the result of my action. There is a concrete result when I throw the pencil that hits the sefer, that hits the telephone, that keeps banging along. Each one of those steps is clearly connected to the force that drove it. As opposed to air, who's to say that my blowing, just because I blew, it's the air. So maybe that's called the wind. Maybe it's called nothing. How can you say that air, hot air that, traverses an empty space, it's the maisa which results at the end is misyaches to me.
But if you don't need a koach rishon, so what's the difference?
Right. If you just need to come from the person, it just has to come from me.
But that's exactly
If I'm saying only three things need koach rishon, then what's the difference? I should be able to put on a timer.
No, because Rav Shefter is saying there's two different things. There's something called maisa ha'adam, that's required in all these cases, and then there's a special thing called koach gavra that's only required in 3 cases in all of Shas. So in those 3 cases in all of Shas, you require koach rishon, whereas in every other case, you only require koach sheni. But koach sheni still needs a clear maisa that identifies the result with me. I pull up the dam, so the water flows, so it turns the wheel that kills the guy. So you would just work backwards. The wheel turned because the water hit it, because the thing was lifted, because I took my hand and picked it up. Who is to say that you could extend it one step further and said if I blow something, maybe that's not even koach sheni. Maybe that's not even misyaches to me at all, because there's no direct result from the energy can't be attributed to me the same way than when I throw a baseball. That's what I would suggest is a basic chiluk between the case of the nipuach and the case of koach sheni, because even the koach sheni is still not called grama because it can directly be attributed to me. Maybe.
Okay, it's what to think about. What to think about. Okay, one more extension of this, which even less direct, but which is accepted that it works. Okay, I said to you, the person, turn on the boiler. You sit there and you hit the button and turn the boiler on. Okay, there's another extension that's not as commonly used, but is definitely used, which is something. It's called a Shane machine, after the person who invented it, a guy named Shane. That was his last name. That's his last name. Which is, it's a way of turning on a boiler remotely. Right? The mashgiach, the boiler is connected to a phone system. The mashgiach calls a phone number. When he calls the phone number, it asks him for a password. If he enters the right password, it turns on the boiler. Okay, and it's really amazing to watch. We had talked about maybe going to see a factory. The factory that had one is one that uses this machine, and the mashgiach tests it when he comes there. He does it every morning from home. This company, their equipment goes on new every day, so he has to set it every morning. He wakes up and does the numbers. But when he comes there on his visits, he tests it and says, "Let's try to turn it on without my pressing the buttons," or "Let's press the button and see if I didn't really accomplish anything." And lo and behold, he presses the button and the machine goes on right in front of his eyes. Okay, he does it standing there, but of course it's going through the cell lines and who knows where it went before it got to there. But it's immediate. Okay, so that's also considered. Now that's sort of more like, if we would call it like a blown in the air. Okay, there's no connection because I'm pushing the phone and there's a boiler 50 miles away that's going on, or 5,000 miles away going on. But over here, that's also considered. It's considered that everyone accepts nowadays that that's considered that he did it, and if that's considered he lit up the fire. Okay, if we make it to this place, we will talk about it. In this place, he does at least one that he turns on with his phone. Okay, it's a very interesting thing. It's fun to watch. Okay, it's interesting.
Can they turn it on without the phone?
No, they can't. That's what he tests it. He'll try to turn it off and then try to just flip the switch.
Wake up in the morning and there's no work in the factory.
They wake him up.
I'm sure.
Now, usually, what's supposed to happen is there's supposed to be backup, which is to say other people who can light it up. What happens if something happens to him? What happens if his wife has a baby in the middle of the night and off he is, who knows where, and he's like, "Hello, my phone is dead. My daughter's cell phone fell into the washing machine. Okay, my phone fell in the washing machine. Forget it. I'm hopeless. You can't find me. So what are you going to do now?" So there's a backup. Other people who can call in the code and do the same thing. But now, you have to realize, something more important than that is what happens when it's Yom Tov. Okay, this only works in a company that is closed on Shabbos. Okay, they could do that. What happens when it's Yom Tov? Rosh Hashanah was Thursday and Friday. So that means they can't cook on Thursday and Friday. Thursday and Friday are regular. So it only works in companies that can afford to be down on. They'll know in advance, but they can afford to be on these odd days. So on a Wednesday in the middle of no place is going to be Shavuos. So they have to. And in this company, it works very well because of their business. They can, if they know in advance, they can be just not produce that section of the plant for those days. They can handle it, but it has to work. It has to be for the right company. And you have to have the right mashgiach. This person, he does it for. I don't know if he does it for any. He used to do it for a few places. Every morning he'd wake up, do his phone calls, and go off to shul. Okay.
You'd have to say maybe a brachos before you.
A brachos.
The easiest work in the world.
Easiest work? Well, yeah, but
Easiest job in the world.
that's not his whole job. That's not 5 minutes of his job. And when they wake him up in the middle of the night, then that's not so much.
Not nice.
Okay. This same mashgiach works very hard. Every month. Today is it Monday now? It's Monday. He's just coming back from a kashrus. He does an early kashrus every Monday morning, and he works hard. Okay. He does a kashrus at a place that has an awful odor. Okay, so he kashers and comes home and showers because the place has such an awful odor. This is his Monday morning routine. And depending if he does it before or after davening, depending on when dates is. That's his Monday morning routine. Okay, now when we're talking about boilers, I'm going to throw in another point which is worth considering, which is I said to you that when you cook in a factory, you have this boiler. There's a fire sitting someplace that cooks up water, turns the water into steam, and that steam spreads all around the plant to cook the food. So the question on that is, how does it help that the Yid lit the fire in the boiler? Nothing's cooking in the boiler. The Yid lit the fire, but he didn't light the fire that anybody's cooking with. It's not like the guys in the plant are sticking hot dogs into the boiler, right? The boiler is sitting there in a basement someplace, cooking away, cooking up water. It's the steam that's cooking the food. So we should say, if the Yid would open the steam line to cook up the food, that would be one thing. But that's not what happens. The boiler is on. Let's think about what happens every night. The boiler stays on. All the kettles are closed. There's no steam going to any of these kettles. They're cold as anything. So everything, the force that cooks is put back, so to speak, put back into the boiler. And now these pots are all just sitting there empty and cold. Comes the morning, somebody puts food into it, essentially turns on the fire, meaning he lets the steam flow into this to this pot and starts to cook with it. So how can you say that the Yid lit the fire? He didn't light the fire that you cook with. The fire that you cook with is off someplace else. He's just what he really should need to do is open the valve to make the cooking happen in this pot. That's what he really should be doing. Okay. So there's different answers. There's two different ways to answer that question. Okay. Now there are three ways to answer the question. Okay. The first way to answer the question was this was Rav Shechter's first response to the question. Okay. His first response was, "You're right. Doesn't help." Okay. Good point. Okay. Doesn't help the cooking. That was his first response. No, you can't turn on the boiler. Okay. Yeah. Rav Shechter, as most of you probably know, is not afraid of being controversial or unusual. You know, he spoke at the CRC. You were there. So people said to me, when he was here for Shabbos, what did he speak about? I said, oh, he was very controversial. He said, you can't eat milk and you can eat swordfish. That's what he said. So just what you were expecting from a nice share by Kashrus, So, okay, so Rav Shechter wasn't afraid. He said, so basically, in other words, anything that needs Bishul Yisroel, Rav Shechter just said, okay, no, so it's not Bishul Yisroel. Everything that has hashgacha, it's not Bishul Yisroel. Fluid. Okay, just sorry. Half the company is just out the window. Okay, so there's two more accepted answers. Rav Shechter accepted these as well. That was just his initial reaction. Rabbi Genack said, look, this is no different than what we're going to talk about soon, which is it's Eish Me'esh. The Yid lit a fire, and in a certain sense, the guy in the company took that fire and dragged that fire over to here, or lit his own fire and brought it to over here, so to speak. So it's not exactly a traditional Eish Me'esh, but he's using the Yid's fire. The Yid's fire is the base, and from that, the guy is doing things to cook around the plant, and that should be considered along the lines of Eish Me'esh. That was one answer.
Isn't Eish Me'esh the only Samech to the
We're going to talk about that in a second. We're coming to that. We're going to get to Eish Me'esh, but that's how Genack said. It's an Eish Me'esh type of thing. And Rebelsky had a different way of looking at it. He said, really, we're making a mistake. I said to you, no one's cooking in the fire that's in the boiler. He said, that's not correct. The heat that cooks in this plant is the big fire that's in the boiler. But for efficiency purposes, instead of having a fire under every pot, they would rather have one fire there and use some kind of a media to transfer the heat from there to there. It's a convenience to get the heat from over there to the different parts of the plant. It's more efficient, it's more convenient, it's more safe to have the fire in one place and then spread it around using something rather than keep it in its place. But really, it's the fire in that boiler that's cooking everything in the plant, and that's the truth. It is the fire it's that heat that's being the heat is being transferred into the steam, and the steam is then going around the plant. So he says, really, that fire is the fire that does the cooking. Okay? A nafkamina, I'm not going to get into detail of this, but a nafkamina between these two answers is, there are some companies that have two boilers. Those two boilers both feed into the same lines. Okay? That means there's they don't work it's not like this one takes care of the left side of the plant, and this takes care of the right side of the plant. Both of them feed into one big line that feeds both sides of the plant. Okay? And they complement each other. Okay? So if we have time, we would talk about how these two answers, depending on which answer you think, whether that works or not. If the Yid lit only one of the boilers and not both, would that still work? Okay? That's for some other time. Okay. You can think about it later. Okay. So we've talked about some of the main ways you would make Bishul Yisroel in the factory. I'm going to put in another one because you've surely heard about it. It's worth talking about it. That is the light bulbs and glow plugs and those kind of things. Okay, you've surely heard about it. It relates to food service also. In the seriously, I can think about at least one place in food service that we do it. There's probably more than that that we use it in food service also. So we're sort of getting to that. We're moving towards that direction. The Gemara says there's three ways to make food Bishul Yisroel. The Yid could light the fire, the Yid could put the food on the fire, or the Yid could be Chata b'Gecholin. There's three different ways that you could make Bishul Yisroel. The Rosh says, when we say that the Yid's mechata, it's got to be that he does something that helps in the cooking. Just like if you light the fire, or you put the food on the fire, it makes the food get cooked, or it helps in the cooking. if the Yid would be mechata and not do anything for the cooking, it's not Bishul Yisroel. Bishul Yisroel, the Yid cooked. What do you mean the Yid cooked? If the Yid just soaked the coals for a second and that made no difference, he has rayas that wouldn't work. And he says that would not be considered Bishul Yisroel. Okay? The Rosh himself brings, the Ram argues. The Ram says, no, it's not important that the Yid's stoking of the coals should have any effect on the cooking, but rather the whole point of Bishul Yisroel is that there should be a hecker. We want to make sure that the Yid is in, that the Yid and the Goy should understand that there's a Yid involved in the cooking, and by that will prevent Kashrus. Remember, Bishul Achim is also because of Kashrus. We're afraid if they get too friendly with each other, it could lead to intermarriage. So we say, if there's a hecker that I can't eat your food, I need to make a hecker. Almost like I need a hecker before I can eat your food. It already puts a little distance between the two of us. It just makes the point of we don't mix socially, and therefore it makes this hecker, and the hecker is good enough. So even the point is not the cooking. We call it Bishul Yisroel, but it doesn't have to be, so to speak, Bishul Yisroel. It has to just have a hecker between them. Yes.
Is the Rosh maybe emphasizing more the chash of the Talmud than the Rambam is?
It's not what he says. You could say like that. You could, but it's not what he says. He says, he brings rayas. The Yid has to be part of the cooking. He's looking from the cooking Shabbat, from the. You could say it has to do with that, but I don't see that. He just because what did the Yid do? The Yid didn't make it cook anything. So that's a.
But you're saying just on that you said it doesn't do much for chash of Kashrus because he's not doing very much.
I would say that for the Rosh, it's true that for the chash of Kashrus, any hecker would be good enough. But when Chazal make a takana, they say this is the chash. This is the reason I'm making a takana. Now there's a structure for how the takana is set up. The structure is the Yid has to cook. The Yid has to cook to prevent Kashrus. So now the rule is I have to cook. And I don't have to say I have to do something to prevent Kashrus. Right? We don't say it's...
Otherwise it would just be enough for the Mashgiach to come in every Monday at 10 o'clock.
Let's say wave at them. Right? Wave at them. Say, hi, I'm here. Right? Okay, good. Call them up in the morning. Right? You have to talk to them. You can call them in the morning. Just say hello. Right? So it's once the takana has its gathered to it, it has a certain structure, the Yid has to cook. The Yid has to cook. The Yid has to cook. Okay. So came along many years ago, Rabbi Heinemann came up with this idea. He said, look, if all I need to do is a hecker, now, as you know, we pass like the Rambam, that's halacha yud, I think it's halacha yud, we pass like the Rambam, that you only have to have a hecker. So he says, if all I have to have is a hecker, and the fire doesn't actually have to do any cooking, so then I could put in some little heat source into the oven, okay? It started as a light bulb. We will hear what the nafkamin is in a second, but a light bulb, a glow plug is just to explain to you, a glow plug is a little piece of ceramic. Electricity flows through it, and it glows red hot for a year at a time, a year and a half at a time. It glows for a long time. Okay, it's used for different purposes in companies, but for Bishul Yisroel, it has this great value because it stays on forever. It stays on for a year. It'll just go and go and go. And it gives heat. It's boiling, burning hot. So he said, put something on, but the Yid will light it. Now the Yid made a hecker in the fire. A hecker that the Yid is participating in the cooking, even though it does zero for the cooking. I mean, if you would put food onto it, it would actually cook, but it doesn't really help in the cooking. But it's good enough, just for a hecker, just like being machat b'kol. That was his idea. Okay, and people, by and large, did not like what he said. Okay, and they had a bunch of reasons. There's one common thread to every one of the reasons. Any of the reasons that they argue is that no one had a raya. Okay? Every person had a svara why they thought he was wrong. Nobody had a raya to why they thought he was wrong. Okay? So I'll tell you some of the svaras that people said, and they go like this. One svara is like this. If you're supposed to be making a hecker, he says, then it's an oxymoron to say, I made a hecker that lasts forever. Okay? The hecker is, I have to participate in the cooking or else you can't make the food. If I make a hecker now and it lasts for the next 45 years, something's missing. That means that nobody realizes it's so painless that no one even realizes that the rabbi's participating. Well, if nobody realizes it, then you didn't get a hecker. Okay?
The boiler. You could say the same smart for the boiler.
Right. You take.
That's cooking.
What?
If you say that's like the heat with the fire, that's part of the cooking. So then.
But he lit the fire 6 months ago.
Right, but if the idea is to get a hecker, they say, what do you could say it now. It happens to be that the place can talk about this. Okay, we're going to do an aside now for a second. It happens that the place can talk about, does the Yid's does his lighting of the fire last forever? Okay? They talk about it because there's a din here about if you lit it, it can last for a week. The din in the place says if it lasts for a week, it can last for a week. Is there some kind of end to what it lasts for? And the din is that it's not. The din is that it can go forever. It really can go forever. So even though in theory so there's a surah that says the hecker dies, okay, but in din the hecker doesn't die. The hecker lasts forever. In hashkafa it might be wrong. In hashkafa it might be is that something seems wrong about that. Somehow we seem to be missing the point.
Put a glow bar with, with the face of a rabbi or it says CRC on it. I mean, it's pretty accurate. I mean,
Okay.
it's going to be showing everyone what a new guy's going to come into the factory. Why is this thing on? Oh, it's because that rabbi dude came on here 10 years ago.
We could talk about that. I have to tell you that in one of the places they went to show me the glow bar. I said, I want to see the glow bar. For my curiosity, I want to see it. Okay, it took like 15 minutes or something to find the glow bar. So you say there's a picture of the rabbi, a dancing rabbi on there. We didn't see it.
That's different.
Okay. So that's one thing. Okay. So whether the hecker lasts forever is a shot. Those who said it can't be that the hecker can last forever. Okay. Then you have another person came along with this. Is the two of them could argue about this afterwards, which is the electric company changes their power sources. Okay, and they switch from one power plant to the other. So if I lit it today, today I lit it coming from power plant A, and then tomorrow it's going to be coming from power plant B. Maybe it's not my yichsid. That's what you guys.
This goes back to say, this should, if you said this far, this would impact lighting the tanner for the year also.
Right, that's correct. Okay. No, lighting the tanner because the gas company.
I'm saying, the town lit by the gas company.
Right.
The gas company doesn't change its requirement, but the electric company does.
I have no idea.
Why should it matter where the source comes from?
What it means is that my action ended. The point would be as if there's this.
Even though the thing is still burning?
There's this fraction of a second between when my lighting plots and then the next lighting, the electricity from this place stopped and this one started again.
Did the thing go out? I don't know. That sounds
Not very moving. Okay.
Definitely not enough for it to be cold.
Right. Not very moving. Okay. Rabbi Shachta said, in order for the yid to do hashlochas kisem, for the yid to make a hecker, the yid's got to make his hecker. That's part of the fire that the guy is cooking with. It can't be that the guy's fire is over here and my hecker is over here. The yid's hecker has got to be in the guy's fire. So therefore, he didn't say that you shouldn't do it. He just said you have to put this glow bar as part of the fire that does the cooking, not independent of it, which is how the originally, so to speak, light bulbs don't go into the middle of fires. The light bulb would be on the side. Okay, so he would say, don't put it on the side, put it integrated into the rest of the cooking fires. Okay, so that's what he wanted to say. If I'm making a hecker, it can't be hecker and guy's fire. It has to be hecker in the guy's fire. Okay, so that was a variation of it. Okay, okay. I'm not sure how this happened, but Shachtu said that I don't know if he did. Someone asked for him, Rabbi Yashiv, who agreed with him on that. Okay, I don't know how the two of them they crossed paths, but
that was the only game we last week.
Okay,
and he said this was the only shaila that they ever asked Rabbi Yashiv.
That he ever asked, or
he and Rav Belsky ever asked for Rabbi Yashiv. He said they sent the shaila to him 3 times, and the first 2 times they didn't hear back, and the 3rd time they heard back. But the way he said it to us was that what Rav Belsky said was that he didn't agree with Rabbi Heinemann, but he didn't say to us, he spoke about this last week, he didn't say that Rav Yashiv actually agreed with his analysis of the Hashlochas Kisem Kul of being in the Eish. He didn't say that. I'm not sure.
That's what he told me.
That's what he said? He said Rav Yashiv agreed with that point?
Yeah, that it has to be integrated into the fire.
Okay.
Very good. Now, wait, we're not finished yet. Okay, somebody else said, okay, all the hashlochas care about this because this is a potentially good, cool to know about. So the Chafkei asked the shout to Diane Fisher, and he said, you can't use a light bulb because light bulbs are to give light as opposed to heat. They're inefficient and they give heat, but they're really there for light. That doesn't count. You have to use something that's meant to give heat. In which case, again, the glow bar would be fine. Glow bars are for that. They're used to start up fires, like pilots. They're there to start up. They are meant for heat. So he was comfortable using something as long as it was for heat and not an incidental thing.
It doesn't seem like the Heter Gichata, the Yisroel Gichata really cares what the purpose is of why it's being cut.
What do you mean?
Meaning, when Yisroel walks by, and he might come to stir the pot, so it could just be like he's Masasik or whatever.
Okay, that's a question whether Masasik works or not. But you say, I'm not sure. I introduced you these, 5 reasons by telling you, no one has a riot that what they're saying is correct. No one has a right that this has to be, this is their own.
The law just seems to say Al Pispar, right? Somebody in the house is going to walk by.
Well, could be mechat. But when you're mechat, that makes the food cook more. Now, even though the food would cook without it, but at least they did something in the cooking process, they're saying this is not the cooking, this is like out of the cooking process. It's just like, okay. And lastly, okay, now, what you said, I thought you were about to say this, okay, which was, for many, many years, everybody, Rabbi Schechter included, thought that the only issue people had was that the fire should be integrated with the rest of the fires. But if we're the special fire that stays on all the time would be part of the rest of the fires, everybody would be satisfied. Everybody would have been comfortable with that. Rabbi Shachar himself came along the company and proposed to the OU, he had a whole design how to do this. I'm going to make a fire that's integrated with the rest of the fires, and it will stay on all the time. So the Yid will light it. It won't be like a globe. It'll be a real fire, like a really plain old gas fire. It will be used like for bakeries. And I'll have my fire built into the other ones. And of course, his angle on this, of course, then you have to buy the fires from him. So he was going to do this, and it was going to make it pastisol, in that case, pastisol, because of, it would stay on, it would be part of all the flames, and he had a whole to-do. And he was all excited, okay, as was everybody else in the office, because everybody thought this was a great idea. Okay, so what they did was, before I tell you Rabbi Belsky's reason, what they did was, they scheduled this person to come into the office for a meeting on a Thursday. Rabbi Belsky comes on Thursday, let's say 11 o'clock. So they scheduled this person to come and meet at 10 o'clock. This way, the meeting would be underway, he would explain what he has to do, and come 11 o'clock, Rabbi Belsky would show up. He would join the meeting to give his blessings to it also. Okay? So in culture, and everybody thought this was a great idea. Okay, I don't remember if we talked to Rabbi Shachar about it, but he was in favor of it. We all thought it was a great idea. Okay, in walks this Rabbi Belsky, and he's sitting there. And he's like scratching his face. He says, "Why are they wasting my time? What's the point of this? We're wasting our time." He's like sitting and like talking to himself. Like, what's going on here? We're wasting our time here. And we're like, "What's the problem?" Like, I was sitting next to him saying, "What's the problem? It's great." He's like, "No, it's worthless. It's just like another light bulb." I said, "No, son, it's integrated. We did the whole." He says, "No, this is a waste of time." I don't know how long he lasted in the meeting, but out he went. Okay, so I go to him. I say, "Okay, just tell him what's the problem." Everyone thought so excited. He was hopeless. Okay, so he said his other reason, which he said he's always had said that this was the problem. Okay, unfortunately nobody knew about this. Okay, nobody. I kid you not. It was strange. But now that we know, now people do know what he says. And I'll tell you what he says. But it was strange because everyone thought that it was like Rabbi Shachar said. They asked for reaction, and they got this answer back, and everybody was they knew what they were headed for, and they thought they solved the problem. Okay, Rabbi Belsky has a different answer. He says is that when a Yid makes a hecker in a fire, that is to say, there's a guy made a fire, and the Yid says, "You're not allowed to cook with that. I'm going to make a hecker in your fire. I'm going to fix your fire." So I fix your fire means that the goy's fire is there first, and then comes along the Yid and fixes that fire. He takes the existing fire that the goy has, and he does something to say, no, a Yid is involved in this thing. He says, but, you can't have the hecker that's there before the goy's fire. If you can't say I'm going to build my hecker, and then on top of which the guy will build his fire, or around which the guy will build his fire. He says,
and then on pilot light.
No, because the pilot light, they light his fire from my fire. So we say the guy's fire is, so to speak, an extension of my fire. Here, they're not lighting the fire from mine. They're saying your fire is standing here. The guy's fire is here. The whole rest of the sefer is the guy's fire. It's not coming from my fire, just its own thing. He says, how can I make a hecker? Hecker means is that I'm fixing up the other person's thing, and here I'm not fixing up his thing. He's just next to my thing. How did that make it a hecker? You can't have a hecker that's there from before you. Okay? Now, Lamaisa is though you is Kashrus to that, though you won't consider that to be possible. Well, I should say that. They used to. I have reason to believe they may not think that anymore. But really, whatever. There's a specific reason. But, as you know, all the names you've heard and told about, and including the CRCs, also Rabbi Schwartz, and they sent the child there. So also they found someone else in there to ask the child. Everyone's got their own people to ask them to. And the whole thought that it was fine. Okay, and there's a raya against Rabbi Belsky. Okay, and the raya is the following. If you look in the next halacha, in halacha Yud, it says that if you light a fire, we mentioned this in passing a second ago. If the Yid lights a fire, he participates in the baking of the oven. If the oven in case is 3 times. 3 times in one day they bake in an oven. The first 2 times the Yid participates, and the 3rd time he doesn't. What's the din? Since the oven stayed warm, it's considered a continuation of the Yid's cooking, and the 3rd baking is also considered pasisol. Okay? The Gra says, why is it still pasisol? Now we might have our own way of saying this. The Gra says, why is it pasisol? Because he says, coals or heat remain from the earlier one, and therefore it's like hashlachas kisei. The heat and coals that are there from the first 2 cookings are the kiseim, or it's even better than the kiseim for the 3rd cooking. Okay, that they serve as a Yid's participation in the third cooking also. Okay? Now, that stuff is there from beforehand. The Yid cooked the first 2 times. He went home, and he forgot to come back the third time. But it means his coals were sitting there, a few little coals on the bottom of the fire. They're not able to cook. When the guy builds his fire, he's building his fire with the Yid's kisem over there, which is a raya. That doesn't make a difference if the Yid comes first. Okay? This is a raya, not like Rebelsi. Okay? But as I said to you, at least at the time, I have reason to think that it may have changed since then. They were cautious for that. At that meeting, for sure they were. Okay? But whether I believe afterwards they were, I have reason to think that it may have changed since then. They may not be cautious anymore. Okay? But this is seemingly a very clear raya.
Most hashgachos, they start cautious for it.
Right, that's correct. Most hashgachos say as long as it is there for heat. Again, certain variations. Like I said to you, some people say it has to be like it's heat and not light.
Right.
So, okay, give a glow plug. It has to be something that's part of the fire, not separate from the fire. All these different sort of tweakings of it to say they're basically accepting the idea, and they have their own variation of how they want to do it. Okay, as opposed to Rebelski saying no, he doesn't want to hear the idea. That's the difference over here. Right. So basically, everyone's agreeing with it. All hashgachos that I know accept it with some detail, while he doesn't want to take it at all. Okay, he doesn't want to hear from it anyway. Okay. Let's move on. We're spending a lot of time on this. Let's move to, there's more for factories. We'll move to food service. Okay?
Before we move to food service,
Go ahead.
let me just, I don't know if you're going to touch on this later. Rav Shefter alluded to it. I don't know, we never, Rav Vadia said about this in general. Is there like a mahalach about Svardim?
I was not going to talk about it.
Oh, okay.
I wasn't because I thought about it, listen, should I talk about that? Because I was told to talk about how to make Bishul Yisroel. So I could have thought about how to start to make Bishul Yisroel. Okay, so what did he say?
Meaning like all these gigantic companies, if they're all relying on all these skulas, so then for Pasakum, maybe it'll fly, but for Bishul Akum, how does Svardim, these are big companies, it's not like a mom and pop restaurant, right?
Correct.
So how does Svardim eat all this food?
So Rav Vadia has an answer for how that works. If we don't hold Rav Vadia has his own answer. I mean, he's
It's just restaurant stuff.
It's more based on the basil shell,
and
right? But let's say it's a non-Jewish, right? But if it's like a non-Jewish company, some giant.
So if we have to be sonach on hashlachas kisei, that's not going to work for them. Okay, so you're saying is for foods that need Bishul Yisroel, then the Sephardi needs to find out whether they made Bishul Yisroel in a way that satisfies him. That's a fair statement. There's another thing is that there are this is really nice to talk about. There are things that we say don't need Bishul Yisroel because of something that Sephardim don't hold of either. Okay, there are things that are not Bishul Yisroel, but Sephardim think that it needs to be Bishul Yisroel. Well, that's for a different time. Okay, there's variations that also.
And you do it because of them?
No, we don't do it. The food is we're Ashkenazim, so we make the hashgacha for Ashkenazim. His question is, well, the Sephardim should therefore not be able to eat the food. They should need to know what they're getting into before they eat the food.
And the answer is yes.
The answer is, most of them say, well, Rabbi Vadia said, that we don't have to worry about it. That's the basic answer. We're powerful all these things, and we don't have to worry about it. That's how most of them take that approach. If the ones who want to be more particular would have to be very sophisticated. They really would have to know what they were doing to do. Not to say they can't do it. They'd have to be more sophisticated and get it right. It could be done.
I wonder if in Israel, because there's so many Svardim.
There are specific hashgachot. There are Sephardi hashgachot. There are. Beit Yosef has his own hashgacha. Rabbi Vadia has his own hashgacha. For example.
Those places
Eretz Yisrael hashgacha works very different than here. In particular, about Bishul Akum, they do things very differently than we do. They do things very. It's sort of like they don't want to know from Bishul Yisroel. Everything's Bishul Yisroel. Okay, everything has to be Bishul Yisroel. However, they have mashgichim all the time, all over the place. It's a very different style than we do it.
They have a lot more Jews.
Jews, whatever. It's a whole different. They have a different style. When you talk to them about Bishul Yisroel, they don't know the details so they don't think about it. It's like everything is Bishul Yisroel. Everything the Yid lights it. Whatever. They have a very different way of looking at it. So, I don't know. Whatever. They're different. Okay. But it's fair. For Sephardim, yes, Sephardim should really need
their own hashgacha. That's what they should probably.
Or they need a liaison to a hashgacha to be able to someone who knows what he's talking about to say to them, okay, this is what you could eat and this is what you can't eat, or this is what you should be careful about. That's what they yeah. Okay.
Have phone calls from them?
Unfortunately, no. I think most of them say, as Rabbi Vadia said, we're allowed to eat it. Doesn't make a difference, even though it doesn't meet what we want. Rabbi said we could eat it. So most of them that's it. The tshuva, is a very atypical tshuva for Bavadia, because Bavadia's tshuva always say is, okay, there's two parts to Bavadia's tshuva. One is, here are 500 people who talked about the Shai that you never heard of. Okay? And 226 say this way, and 187 say this way. People who you never heard of. That's one style of it. And the other style is that whatever the Shulchan Aruch says is right. Okay? It doesn't make a difference how many people you pile up on the other side. Whatever the Shulchan Aruch said is right. We don't move off what the Shulchan Aruch said. And here, the Shulchan Aruch says one way, and he says not to do that. So it's very unusual for a truth is that he should be saying the Shulchan Aruch says one way. He's telling you it's okay. You don't have to do that. That's very unusual from his. Okay, I guess the Sfarad Nitid. It's a serious situation because the Hashgachas are basically, especially in America, controlled by Ashkenazim, not by Sfarad. So. Okay. In food service. In food service, what we've talked about until now doesn't work in food service. Okay? Well, in food service, there's lots of different fires, there's lots of things going on in the kitchen, and one of the simplest ways to make Bishul Yisroel, the most correct way to make Bishul Yisroel is that there should be a rule. Is most food service has a mashgiach there all the time, has a Jewish presence there all the time. What I'm saying is he's not walking around just with a badge that says, I'm the mashgiach, just walking around, checking on things. He does things in the place also. So you might see him as the guy behind the counter, but there's a Jewish person. And the right way is that no fire should be lit except by him. Okay, that's really the way it's supposed to be, is no fires are ever lit except by that person. Okay, but the lamaisa is that can cause a lot of difficulty in the kitchen. There's a busy kitchen. People are turning fires on and off all the time. So to have this person always available and always watching that no one lights a fire without him makes it difficult in the kitchen. I'm not saying you shouldn't do that. That's a big advantage. In some places they say the rabbi lights all fires. No one touches a fire except for him. Okay? But that's a good way to do things. Okay? But Lamaisa, in many places they consider using a pilot light. You had mentioned before. They want to use a pilot. What does that mean? The oven, let's say in an oven, there's 6 burners on the top. Each one of them has a little fire underneath it. Underneath is a little fire, and from that fire, when you light up the bigger fire, the gas passes through the little one. Hold on 1 second, lights up the bigger fire off of that little fire. Yes.
Is it true that all ovens have pilot lights, or only some ovens?
Okay. So let me stop for a second and tell you that there are 3 kinds of pilot lights. Okay, there's 3 kinds, and it's important to know. It's more important for factories, but it's important to hear also. There's 3 different kinds of pilot lights. And companies, in all honesty, will tell you, of course we have a pilot light. Yes, we have a pilot light. Here it is, Rabbi. Look, there's the pilot light. But there's 3 different kinds. So the person who's looking has to be aware of what he's seeing rather than just hear the word pilot light and say, fine, I'm safe. I have a pilot light. Okay? And that is as follows. The word pilot light, on a technical term, not on a Jewish term, we think of a pilot light as the little fire from which you light the big fire. A pilot light means for whatever reason, it's easier to light a big fire off of a little fire. So the pilot is the small fire. It's very easy to light a small fire, and then the big fire lights off the small fire. Okay, but that pilot can function in 3 different ways. Okay, one pilot could be the pilot when you wanna light the big fire, the little fire goes on for a minute. The big fire gets lit by it, and then the little fire goes out. It's done its purpose in life, and it goes out. It only needs to be, so that's a little fire that's lit temporarily until the big fire is established, and then the little fire goes out. Okay, so it's done its job, and it goes out. That doesn't help for Bishul Yisroel, because you didn't light that fire. Second is, the little fire goes on, and it doesn't just stay on to get the big fire lit. It stays on the whole time that the big fire is lit. I forget the names of these kinds. Okay, it doesn't go off, but as soon as you turn off the big fire, the little fire goes off also. Okay, so the little fire goes on, lights the big fire. When you turn off the big fire, out goes the little fire also. Okay. Again, it doesn't help the fact that you lit that little fire, because the minute they turn the oven off, out goes that little fire also. Okay, so neither of those is going to help. What we need is what's called a standing pilot, which is the pilot is lit and it stays lit 24/7. It always burns. It's this little fire, and whenever you look into the oven, you'll always see the little fire burning. Okay, it never goes off. It's always on 24/7. Okay, that's the kind of pilot that we're looking for. So, if you go into in your homes, you don't have that anymore. You have a pilot. but you don't have a standing pilot. You have a pilot, sometimes you see it in your oven, when you turn on the fire, you see the orange glow of your ceramic, your glow plug going on, goes on for a short time, lights up the fire, and then it goes off. Okay?
So I think stoves have it more often than...
Yes, the stove on a...
No, not anymore.
No, nowadays,
1970s.
nowadays what you have in your
Our oven is from 1970.
in your stovetop, you'll have is a pilot. Everyone has a pilot, but the pilot goes on. It's in the form of a spark. Okay? It goes on while you're lighting the big flame. The little flame is going. And often it's just a spark. It's a little flame that's going continuously to light up the big fire. As soon as your big fire is lit, that turns off. Or you turn it off and it goes out. Or on your stove, on your oven, the glow plug goes on. Once the big fires are lit, it turns itself off.
Each burner has its own pilot in today's stoves.
It depends. Either they have their own, or there's one for a pair, or there's one for all of them together. However they work it. But again, it's a little fire. The ones in my house, it goes off as soon as the oven's on. As soon as the big fire is lit, it's done its job. It doesn't need to be on anymore. It goes off. Okay. So in commercial ovens, the commercial stoves, often there's a standing pilot, or you can have it put in special. You know, the company says we want to make it Bishul Yisroel, so we're going to put in special. Specifically put in a standing pilot that's on all the time. And if you walk into the kitchen, you could see it. If you know what you're looking at, it's really easy to see if the pilots are on. Okay? The pilot is this little flame. It's a nice size flame under the boiler. If you see it once, you'll recognize where it is, and you could see if that's on. So what we do is you say, okay, the Yid's going to light that pilot. You're going to come and light the pilots. Then every time someone turns on the fire, it comes off of that pilot. So that helps for many of the things. And in particular, it could help for a stove. It potentially could help for stovetops, which is the things that go on and off most often. The big oven, that you could turn on once in the morning, it just stays on. You know, they're going to keep that on all the time. The stovetops, they would put on this pot, take it off, put it on. So if it would work for a stovetop, it has an advantage that it could be on. Well, and let's say you have a fryer. Well, the fryer might go on once for the whole day. Okay, but you have a griddle, the griddle might go on and off, so then you might, if it has a pilot, it would be to your advantage. Okay? In a griddle, you could tell the pilot's on. You can't see it usually. You just put your hand on it. Okay, if the fire's off and it feels warm, okay, then you know the pilot's working. Yes?
So when I said in restaurants, just as Brad mentioned, I'm under the impression that the ovens today don't have these standing pilot lights, so do they install them?
Okay, so in a home oven, they don't have it. Doesn't exist. Commercial ovens, they sometimes do sometimes they come with it, or sometimes the restaurant will specifically put it in to help for the Bishul Yisroel. It's not, I don't know if it is or not standard, but at home it never exists. It never exists at home. In a commercial oven, it sometimes comes naturally. Sometimes you have to have it specially put in. Okay, so now, there's two shilas about, I'm going to quote, two shilas about pilots. One is, I don't know what your name is, but he had mentioned before, which is, Dov. Okay, what he mentioned before, which is, the Ramah says that you could use Eish Me'esh. What we're doing, of course, the pilot, I should have spoken this out, the pilot is Eish Me'esh. The Yid lit the fire, from which the Kosher is fire, and that's considered Eish Me'esh, it works. The Ramah says that it's good. Okay. The question is that the Ramah is coming from Isser Heter, who says b'diavad that it works. Okay, gives the impression that it's not a first choice, and we didn't talk about this, but it's really an extension of a Gemara. The Gemara doesn't ever say that Eish Me'esh works. It's an extension of the Gemara. So the Isser Heter says b'diavad it would work. The Ramah doesn't say it works b'diavad. Okay, the Ramah, there's lots of other things that we do that the Ramah says l'chatchila that the people before him said is only b'diavad. But in this case, there are a number of later poskim who make it sound like Eish Me'esh is only b'diavad. Okay, there's a number who hold that Eish Me'esh is only b'diavad. Okay, for that reason, there are many hashgachos who say like this. They say, in a factory where we're serving a purpose to the tzibur, and it's not realistic for a yid to go there and light the fire every day, we'll be samach on a pilot. We sort of treat that like a b'diavad. Okay? They only want to do it, they only want to be samach on Eish Me'esh b'diavad, so in a case like a factory, if the yid's going to do the Eish Me'esh, fine, we'll be samach on Eish Me'esh, it's good enough. In a restaurant where there's a mashgiach there, it's a matter of how much responsibility should the mashgiach have? Should we force the mashgiach to light every fire, or should we say to the mashgiach, you could not light the fire, we'll be samach on the pilot? That's a situation where we should push that the mashgiach should light every fire, and we should not be samach on Eish Me'esh. Okay, so there are some hashgachos who take that attitude that we should not be samach on the pilots. Since in a restaurant, it's a case of we have a choice of a lechatchila. There's a mashgiach sitting there anyhow. Let the mashgiach be the one to light all the fires. Even those people, I'll tell you, use the pilots as a backup. Okay, they do tell the mashgiach to light the pilots. as a backup, because in case they miss something, in case something goes wrong, Lamai says the Yid did light the pilot, and B'diavad it really works. So for sure, that's okay for B'diavad. Okay? All the hashgachos do not take that attitude. They say, look, the mashgiach has enough on his head. The mashgiach, to give him that extra responsibility means that it causes a lot of tension or difficulty in the kitchen. It's throwing something else on his head. And they say, look, the Ramah said it's mutter. So the fact that there are those who say that it's only B'diavad, they're not kosher for that, and they say, look, let the mashgiach light the fire. Let's be samach on the eish be'esh. We don't have to have the mashgiach actually light the fires. Okay, now that's one part of the question. That's one part of the question. The second question is a very practical question, which is commercial kitchens. I hope I don't burst your bubble, but commercial kitchens don't look anything like your kitchen. Okay, in your kitchen everything is nice and neat and clean. And in commercial kitchens, there's nothing like that. In commercial kitchens, there's food spilling all over the place. There's things that don't work. There are people who are... It's a very busy place. In your house, they cook for an hour a day, and in the commercial kitchen, they cook for 20 hours a day. Okay, it's very busy places, and pilots don't stay on. Okay, there's different kinds of pilots. Some pilots are covered, like I said, like on a griddle. The pilot is covered by a big piece of metal. That's going to stay on. But the pilot on a stovetop goes out all the time. They get clogged up with old food. Sometimes they don't work. Sometimes they work and things spill over. Okay, they spill over. What?
It's a high mission
situation. It's a busy kitchen. You know, there are places where the way they clean things, they just pour water all over the whole top of the thing to clean it off. It's very messy. Okay, I once went on the same morning to watch two places Kosher for Pesach. Two restaurants Kosher for Pesach. Okay, in one restaurant, the restaurant had been open. The entire night they had a cleaning crew cleaning the place. Okay, cleaning with a truck parked outside with hot acid to clean the pieces of this kitchen. Okay, that's what was going on. They had a crew who came in to clean. Okay, wait a second. When he came in, the place was so filthy. It was like you couldn't believe how after a whole night of cleaning by a professional crew, the grease, the touches, like disgusting. You couldn't. The place, it was like they were nowhere ready for kosher. Okay, the next place we went to was a place that you could literally eat off the floors. The place was sparkling clean. The guys walking with the big white hats. The place was sparkling clean. You could manage eat off the floor. Okay, so it just, some places are this, and it doesn't necessarily reflect on how much you paid for your supper, how nice it looks in the bag. Okay? So,
you want to tell us?
no, it wasn't in this city, a different city. Okay, but our places are not any better. Okay, so so there are those people who say okay, I'm willing to be samach on a pilot because the din is that it's mutter. I can be samach on a pilot, but I might only be samach on a pilot when it's a covered pilot. Okay, there's some pilots are covered and some of them are exposed. Okay, they say we won't be samach on it for an exposed one, or we'll be very particular where we're samach on it because it depends on how common it is for it to blow out. Or there are people who say, and this is a variation of the same thing. They say we'll be samach on it. But even so, every Sunday morning, mashgiach should blow out and relight all the pilots. Okay, in other words, good chance that some of the pilots went out during the week. We don't really know. So Baruch Hashem, Safik Bishlach in this mutter. But every Sunday morning, let's have the Yid relight the pilots anyhow. You never know what happened over the past week. Let's start again fresh once a week. Let the mashgiach relight his pilots. Okay, and I've done this. Walk into the place and blow out the pilot, just to see what happens. Okay? Walk into the kitchen, blow out the pilot. And when you leave, what happened? Did someone call the mashgiach to relight the pilot? Remember, there's fire all over the place. Okay? A common way to relight pilots that don't work is take a fire. It might be mutter, actually. This might actually be mutter, but a common way is, what they do is, they have one fire burning. Well, sometimes they use a tissue. They just take a tissue. But other times they take if any of you ever watched Happiness, it's like the fonts. That's what it looks like. They take a pot, and they slam the pot on one fire, and the fire jumps across to the other one and lights up the pilots. Okay, you have to be really. The font's going to do it. Fire, they all light up like that. Okay, so that might actually still qualify as Bishul Yisroel. Okay, yeah, they do that. HVH, right? So it might still be HVH, but I think it's that if you don't watch, they'll light it up themselves. Okay, so sometimes we do it as a test, just blow out the pilot. And see half an hour later, well, what happened? How did they get relit? That's a test to see how well the system works. Okay? But so there's different levels of how much
you eat at a restaurant the first half of the week. It's more of a change of food because
that's the procedure. Yes.
Go eat on Sunday.
I told you, Sal Bishlach is mutter. So Baruch Hashem. So okay. So
you eat at a restaurant.
You want to know if I can afford to eat at restaurants, or do I trust the Kashrus? Yeah, we trust the Kashrus. Yes. Bishlach is not so sorry. It's only drop on it. Something is mutter. Okay. Whatever. Okay. So pilots have their own. There's a halachic shaila, should be samachan chatchila, and the practical is not pushed to the side. The practical is very serious. How do you make sure of it? Now, you should know in cities, when you leave a big city, you go to smaller cities. Many of them will allow a restaurant to be open without a mashgiach. They will allow certain kinds of restaurants, in particular, this is what it is, Indian restaurants, open without a mashgiach. They say why? They serve no meat. They're completely vegetarian. They're vegetarian. What they'll do is the mashgiach will come in for an hour in the morning and check their vegetables. Okay, so every morning from 9 to 10, the mashgiach comes in, checks all the vegetables that they need, and they say, so what could go wrong? Okay, so what often is a sticking point. Okay, and you could ask Rabbi Eisenbach how many Indian restaurants have applied to the CRC. Okay, he's been to every Indian restaurant in the city because applied to, well, we're kosher, we want to be kosher, and one of the sticking points is Bishul Yisroel, and that is because to have them be able either to have pilots with no one keeping an eye on it, or to have no pilots, there's no way to make it Bishul Yisroel. How are you going to make sure the fires don't go out? Think about it. What happens if a fire does go out? They're going to close the place down? Sorry guys, no French fries for the next 2 hours because we have to wait for the rabbi to show up. What's going to realistically happen when the fire goes out? What happens in these places? So in cities who have less choices than we do, they don't have anybody who's willing to open a restaurant with a mashgiach there all the time to keep an eye on these things. They'll be some and say, look, he lights the fires every morning. They have, there's the yahrzeit candle, the Shiva candle theory. I don't know if you've ever seen that. Okay, the Shiva candle, you know what a Shiva candle, it burns for 7 days? So every Sunday morning, the mashgiach walks in and he lights a Shiva candle. Okay, and it's not because he feels so bad that everyone's dying from eating his bishulakim. It's because it says, in case you ever need to light a fire, light it from there. Okay, they can eish be'esh. At least I'm giving you an option in case the rabbi doesn't show up. Here's an option. Go take from the Shiva candle and light it. So at least, meaning there's this huge nisayon that the Indians are facing. If the fire goes out, they can't serve. If the fire under the wok goes out, they're out of business. What are they supposed to do? They have nothing to serve. So they're supposed to call the rabbi. But Lamai says it's going to take an hour for the rabbi to show up. So we're at least giving them an option to say, okay, at least you light it off there. We're at least giving you a fire that's a yid's fire you could work off of it. Okay? So it's for us, we sitting here with many choices, we don't allow that. Seriously, we won't allow that. They say, no, it's going to be bishulak and we won't let you do it. Or it's not Bishul Yisroel enough for us to let it do. But it is pretty common in other cities, far out cities, I mean, where there aren't choices. I say this is our only way of getting a kosher restaurant that will allow that kind of a thing.
Seems like it works.
What?
Seems like it works.
It seems that it works if they would actually light it from there. But you're counting on the guy to say is, when his wok goes out, to say is, oh, I'm supposed to light it from there instead of from here. Why on earth would he do it? He has a lighter in his pocket. He's not supposed to. They take away all the lighters from them. But when I say he has a lighter in his pocket, he has a lighter in his pocket, it takes a second. The rabbi doesn't know which one he lit it from. Doesn't mean anything. He can't be caught, so to speak. He's not,
It seems like you would at least have the same problem with the light bulb issue. Because this H is not lit as a part of the fire initially. And what if, a guy takes, I like candles to decorate my house, and then a guy takes fire from that. Is that considered H made from H Yisroel?
So you're saying if the original H was not written for cooking,
yeah,
the H was written just for some other purpose, maybe that shouldn't count. Okay, that's worth thinking about. I never thought of it like that. That's worth thinking about. Maybe that shouldn't count as an H. If you held to that problem over there, okay, that's what to think about. Again, I'm telling you, we don't do it locally. In a bigger city, you won't see this. In a smaller city, you will see this. Okay?
From a practical standpoint, if you had a small city where they needed one of these skulas, if they put in a video camera and they were supervising what's going on there, would that...
that helps. We're actually going to talk about that in a second, about using camera. But yeah, that might help. He says, look, we'll put in extra controls to make sure you don't do that. Okay, that might be, maybe that will do the trick. And we at the CRC have been asked to come review other vadim. They call us in, we go around their places and see what's doing. We take them. We would never do this. But we are not to tell you that you shouldn't do this. In other words, if you're abundant comfortable with an Indian restaurant, giving kashkach like that, so we wouldn't do it. If they apply, and they have, we have dozens of them have applied in Chicago to ask for hashkach, and we say no. Rabbi Eisenbach goes down, it talks to them, it tells them they have to close on Shabbos, and that they have to have mashgiach tzmidi, and that they never hear from them again. But we take it
close on Shabbos
because the mashgiach has to be there. So we say to them, but we wouldn't tell you in another city to do that. In your city, it's your abundant. It's within range of possibly working. And for your abundant to decide maybe that should work. We don't tell them not to. We say, look, we take them. We wouldn't do this. You won't find this. There aren't any Indian restaurants in Chicago with hashgacha. Okay? And there's a reason for that. That's because we won't accept it. And other big cities won't do it. But if you're stuck, if that's the only place to eat, then that's what they're up on to decide. Okay. I'm going to do two more things. We'll see if we get to homes. You tell me if you want me to keep on talking. If not, we'll stop there. Okay, let me finish two more things in food service. Okay, which is two other issues that are on food service are, one is called the convection oven. Okay, convection oven, you've probably seen it, even if you don't know the name for it. Okay, the convection oven is the oven that has the doors that open this way. They open, the double doors opening this way. Instead of opening like pull down, they open to the side. There must be a name for it. Okay, and what those ovens are, what's special about the ovens is not that the doors open that way. What's special about the ovens is that they have a fan that circulates the air. Okay, and that helps in the cooking to have the air circulating rather than the air be stationary. And that's why it's called convection. It cooks by convection rather than by, I forgot what the other process is called. Okay, so the issue is, since it has a fan circulating, when you open the door, what happens is hot air is going to blow in your face. That's what's going to happen. So not only that's uncomfortable for the person who opens the door, and it's a waste of the energy of that oven because you're just blowing all your hot air right out of the oven. So what a standard feature on a convection oven is that when you open the door, the fan and usually the flame go out also. Okay, it's standard because they say, why heat the outdoors? Okay, so they turn off the fan. That's for comfort and for waste of energy. And while they're doing that, it also turns off the flame as well. So that's okay. The din is, as long as the oven stays hot, even if the Yid's fire went out, if the oven stays hot, that's good enough. The problem could be is if the convection oven door stays open for too long, then it could actually cool off. That is to say, they're taking out 5 pans of chicken, and they're putting in 4 more pans of something else. It could sit open for half an hour. If in the right situation, it could sit open for a long time, in which case it would cool down. We didn't talk about the temperatures, how much is considered cool, but whatever you hold the shear is, it could cool down below that amount. So a person, if there is a convection oven, usually they get turned on once for the day. That's easy. Or they have a pilot that turns it on in the morning and it stays on. But if they do stay on, if they stay open for too long, then potentially you lose your Bishul Yisroel. You lit it in the morning. If it really cools off, you lose your Bishul Yisroel. Again, depending on what you hold the shear is. Will depend on how long you have to mashgiach check it. Okay, so that's a sort of easier. The mashgiach just has to be aware of it, but it's easy to fix. Okay, so in some places, the mashgiach will do is every time he passes the convection oven, he opens the doors and closes the doors again. Okay? The idea being is that things that are in an oven take an hour to cook, 2 hours to cook. They take time to cook. So if he opens the door, if he passes the thing once an hour, once every 45 minutes, he passes by, he opens the door, he stopped the cooking. Okay, now when he closes the door, he just relit the fire for it. So he's going to essentially catch everything in the middle of its cooking. Okay, he will always be lighting fires. It's like the din says, if it's cooking in your house, don't worry. A Yid surely passed by was machat b'gechaf. So this is an example of that. Is because if the mashgiach, when he passes by, sort of by habit, opens the door and closes it, he's creating Bishul Yisroel. Okay, I forgot to mention that when a Yid creates Bishul Yisroel, it's sort of connected to what I said about a timer. The Yid has to actually get the fire burning rather than just turning the dial of the thermostat. What I mean to say is like this: if your oven is set for 350 and the fire is on, the flame is burning, and I turn the dial from 350 to 400. Okay, what happens? Okay, nothing. What happens is that there's a potential that instead of going off in 2 minutes when it hits 350, it'll go off in 10 minutes when it hits 400. Okay, that's not considered that the Yid did something. What the Yid needs to do is he needs to catch the fire when it's off, and then raise the thermostat. That will make the flame actually go on. So if he comes in, the flame is off, and it's at 350, and he turns it to 400, and he waits for 30 seconds, the flame's going to go on, and he will have accomplished something. Or, for that matter, he could turn the thermostat down, which will cause the fire and wait till the fire goes off. When the fire goes off, he then has a chance to turn it back on a few seconds later and get the fire going again. Okay. One last thing for food service. This is a mix between now moving towards houses, which is food cooked in the microwave. Okay. When you in food service, it's mostly the microwaves are used for reheating foods. Okay, the food that you think that they just cooked today was really cooked. You don't even want to know when, and they're just reheating it. We have an amazing. I have to say, I found this so I couldn't believe it. There's a caterer locally who every year there's like quiet time during like January. There aren't many simchas going on, so he sees when it's going to be quiet on his schedule, and then he won't book any parties for like 2 weeks. And during those 2 weeks, he cooks for Pesach for a hotel. People in a different, that he has nothing to do with the food over there. A hotel for Pesach needs food, so he cooks the food in the middle of January for a hotel for Pesach. So he spends 2 weeks cooking food and preparing food and doing all kinds of things, freezes it. So he kashrus his place for Pesach in January. For 2 weeks, makes food for Pesach, and then goes back to regular and puts stuff into the freezer. And then, 3 months later, people are paying, you don't even want to know what, to go away for Pesach to eat food that was made, Hanukkah. As well.
Wow.
Yeah, anyhow, so you wouldn't believe it, right? But that's life. That's the way it is. So the microwave is usually used to reheat food. Okay, well,
How do you live with that knowledge?
well, I'm not paying for the to go to the hotel. Yeah.
He's the mashkech. He goes quick.
No, I wouldn't go. Okay, so he asked if I eat in a restaurant. Eating in a hotel for Pesach is a whole other level. I'd rather stay home. Anyhow, so the microwaves are usually used for just reheating food and not a problem. The food is already cooked by the yid and it doesn't cause any issues of Bishul Yisroel. The one thing, or maybe two things that microwaves are used for to cook foods from scratch are baked potatoes, and corn. Corn on the cob. Whether corn on the cob needs Bishul Yisroel is not for us to talk about now. It's quite a shiloh, not for us to talk about now. But let's look potatoes. Baked potatoes need Bishul Yisroel. So if
Need Bishul Yisroel?
baked potatoes, yeah, baked potatoes we consider to be shulchan aruch. Yeah. That you might not get a whole potato as is at shulchan aruch, but you would be served mashed potatoes at a wedding, which is what's mashed potato. It's a baked potato that they scooped it out of the inside, they threw in a few other little ingredients, but we consider it to need Bishul Yisroel. So the baked potato needs Bishul Yisroel. If you walk into the restaurant and say, I want a potato with cheese and mushrooms on it, but they're not baking the potato in an oven. It'll take them 2 hours to make the potato. What do? They stick it in the microwave, and then they do whatever they have to dress it up for you to eat it. So that food it's a very common way to make potatoes. You can make it so to speak live for your customer. The guy walks in, he wants a potato, and 5 minutes later you have a potato ready for him. So a microwave, there isn't any way for the yid to light it beforehand. What are you going to do? Turn it on in the morning? I mean, we can't turn on the microwave while we get the food. That doesn't make it different. It doesn't work. So how are you going to make the food Bishul Yisroel in the microwave? Okay, so now there's 2 parts of what I'm going to say to you about that. Okay? The first thing is, in some places make it Bishul Yisroel by saying, for example, only the rabbi controls the microwave, okay, which is a horror, okay, because half the things that go, 90% of the stuff that goes into the microwave doesn't need the rabbi, right? They're just reheating yesterday's chicken, doesn't need the rabbi. So it's a horror to have the mashgiach be in charge of the microwave. Okay? It's only asking for problems. What Rabbi Eisenbach has done here works very well. Is he says to the restaurants every morning, take however many potatoes you need and bake them halfway in the oven. The oven, which is Bishul Yisroel, bake your potatoes half. Let's say it takes an hour to bake a potato. Bake them for half an hour in the oven. Okay, to the point that it's kamacha ben drusoy. So the yid cooked the potato. The potatoes is Bishul Yisroel now. It's Bishul Yisroel. When your customer walks in, you throw it in now for the last 2 minutes that it needs, or however much time it needs to finish off the cooking. That a guy could do. Okay, and it's a great. It works well for the restaurants, and it makes the food Bishul Yisroel. As long as it bakes in the oven for long enough in the morning, they throw 10 of them in the morning, and it bakes for half an hour, however long the time is to make it kamacha ben drusoy. And then whenever they want to, they can just throw it into the microwave. They're half cooked already.
You're assuming that the microwave creates olal shulchan malachim, and that meaning that.
So the second part I have to talk to you is that what I've said until now makes an assumption that cooking something in a microwave needs to be Bishul Yisroel. And that is the standard assumption. It is a standard assumption that things cooked in a microwave needs Bishul Yisroel.
Or even that it's Bishul at all. No.
That it needs Bishul Yisroel. Wait, I for the life of me do not understand it. I have to tell you. I shouldn't say I don't understand it. I don't find it to be consistent. Okay, and that is because we're not going to talk about this, but there's a much bigger shiloh where the food cooked in live steam needs to be Bishul Yisroel or not. Is live steam considered like Isha or it's not like Isha? Okay? On that question, whether food cooked, again, not before we talk about steam just being around the pot, I'm thinking that if it's cooked in live steam, if you hang the fish up and you just blow steam at it to cook it. Okay? But if you cook food in live steam, there's a question whether that needs Bishul Yisroel or not. On that question, most hashgachos are makel. They say even though it's cooking in steam, they're makel and say that's considered ishun and it does not need to be Bishul Yisroel. Some are makmir, most are makel that's not Bishul Yisroel. If you went through the theory of it, okay, you can't say that is be makel about that and be makmir better microwave. The Ramah says only need to have Bishul Yisroel for things that cook with heat. That's what the Ramah says. You only need Bishul Yisroel for things that cook with cooking and baking and frying and things like that cook with heat. Things that cook without a fire, like smoking and brining and pickling, don't need to be Bishul Yisroel. Now, there's a question how to understand what the Rama is saying as applies to cooking with live steam. What happens when you cook with live steam? Should we treat that as cooking with heat, because it is hot, or should we treat that as cooking with smoke, because it's not a flame that's cooking with it? If you're makel about steam, which many are, okay, the CRC is makel, that's cooking with live steam is not considered bishul akum, then that means to say is even though the food is cooking in a regular way, it comes with a plain cooked, it's hot when you're cooking it, it's not bishul yisrael because it's not bishul akum because it's cooked in live steam. That's inconsistent then to say, it makes absolutely no sense, that would be nice, to say that cooking with a microwave needs to be bishul yisrael. There isn't any heat any place. There's not, now, the potato comes out the same as if you cooked it in the oven. But so does the fish that you cook in live steam as if you cooked it in a pot of water also. If you're looking at the results, then we should be machmer about steam. And if you're looking at the method, microwave is 100 times better than steam. Steam is hot. Microwaves are not. Microwave is shooting with invisible, you guys can argue about that, invisible rays, and how it cooks. It's not important. It's not cooking with any heat. There isn't any heat to talk about. So if you look at results, which is one way to look at it, then you would be much more machmir about steam than microwaves. But to say you're going to be makel about steam and machmir microwaves it doesn't make sense.
How is the live steam different than the jacket? Meaning you want to be make on the live steam, but we do need Bishul Yisroel for when steam is
in a jacket. And the reason for that's a question. There are those who want to say that cooking steam in a jacket is also mutter. Okay? But if you remember what I said to you, Rabelsky said, why is lighting a boiler considered Bishul Yisroel? So he said, because really you're cooking in the fire that's in the boiler, and the steam is just immediate to carry the heat from here to there. So we look at that pot as cooking in the fire that's back there in the boiler room. That's what's going on. It's cooking in the fire. If you cook it with live steam, it's a little bit different. If you're cooking just steam in the jacket, it's just an efficiency. Instead of having a fire here, we have a fire over there.
Live steam is actually what's cooking.
Yeah, that's as opposed to the pot. If you cook meatballs in a jacketed kettle, it's just cooking up meatballs. It's sauce and meatball, everything cooking, and the fire, instead of being here, is over there. And just there's an empty pipe in between, so to speak. Okay, but so it really makes no sense. But I say to you that it is standard that everyone is machmir to say that cooking in a microwave, cooking in a microwave needs bishul yisrael. Okay, yet many of those same people, that's us included, many of those same people say that if you cook in steam, it's mutter. It's not bishul yisrael. Okay, so I'm not sure what the reason for this disconnect is. It logically does not make any sense. Okay, I can explain to you why both should be mutter or both should be usher, but I can't explain, and I can even explain to you why one should be mutter and one should be usher. But if I had to pick which one was mutter and which one was usher, the microwave would be mutter and the steam would be usher. But to say that the steam should be mutter and the microwave should be usher is doesn't.
I think what Rabbi was trying to say was that at a state dinner, they would not serve anything from a microwave.
Okay, the reason why they wouldn't is not because, I don't believe it's because the microwave potato tastes different than the baked potato. The reason is because like this. A microwave's advantage is that it cooks the potato in 5 minutes. Okay? If I have to prepare potatoes for 500 people, it's more efficient to do it in the oven because the same 2 hours will cook 500 potatoes as it'll cook one potato. If I had to cook them in a microwave, I'd have to have 50 microwaves lined up and throwing potatoes in the microwave all the time because you can only do one at a time. If I put in 3 potatoes, it takes 3 times as long. So if you're cooking for a state dinner, they wouldn't use a microwave for the practicality of, this is my feeling, the practicality of you might as well put them into the oven if you want to get your 200 potatoes. It works just as well as that. It's just as quick as that is. But as far as the taste of it is, it's not my impression that the
fanciness or why.
My impression is that we're talking about potato. My impression is that the finished product comes tasting the same or similar enough that they would serve it. It's not realistic. A state dinner by its nature has 50 people at it. Well, you can't cook for 50 people in a microwave. Not realistic.
Did you say the same thing about a piece of chicken?
No, not at all. No, not for a piece. No, other foods don't come out the same. Potatoes is our particular shiloh because that's the common thing that you would cook in a microwave that needs biscuits of corn, putting on the side. Potatoes is a common thing you'd cook there, and that comes out basically the same. Chicken, no, I wouldn't say the same. If you cook a piece of chicken in there, no, that's not a No, that's not.
Same thing for
It's not that in principle a microwave. It depends on the food.
Of course it depends on the food. Yes, very much so. It's just like saying cooking in steam.
Right.
You know, if you steam a piece of chicken, okay, it's not going to taste. It's not going to be shaf malchum either. So, but that's not to say that steaming is what made it not. Steam needs bishul yisrael, but the way I cooked it, it's not shaf malchum. Like, and the right example for that is tuna fish. Okay, tuna that's in a can. Okay, tuna fish. If you take the fish out of the water, you can slice it into steaks and serve it as tuna steak. You broil those steaks, and you could eat that at a fancy restaurant. Okay, you could eat, that's considered a food that's Allah Shulchan Aruch. But if you take tuna in your can, that tuna, you know how it's cooked. They hang it by its tail, or whatever. They hang it up, okay, and they cook it in live steam. So steamed tuna is not Allah Shulchan Aruch. Okay, that's for cats. Okay, you don't want to eat that. You can't eat that stuff. So steamed tuna is not Allah, but not because of the steam Shabbat, it's because the method of preparation made the food not Allah Shulchan Aruch. Okay, but potatoes, which is our focus, because that's what you do in a microwave, in a food service restaurant. That's what you would do in the microwave. It basically comes out the same as the other thing.
I don't know if this probably has come across the table. I'll just share it because Rav Shefter shared it with us. Morty asked him, what about tuna fish bismanazeh, because it's eaten nechal chai with sushi. And he thought that was a strong svara.
To say
that therefore it should not ever be subject to Bishul Akum because it's eaten chai by most people in sushi.
There are those who say that. The questions on that are that I don't like sushi. Okay, but my understanding of how it works is that when the fish comes out of the water, for a certain amount of time, the fish is fresh enough to be served sushi grade, that it can be served at sushi. If you were to take that fish and freeze it, forget it, you lost it. If you take that fish and you hold it for 3 days, stick it in the fridge someplace, you can't serve it as sushi anymore. The fish that's turned into canned tuna is beyond sushi grade. Because it's not holding at a point that you can eat it, that you can still eat this food as sushi. You can't sell this anymore to a sushi restaurant. So at that point, right, it's lost. There's a certain amount of time, and you have to take care of it right, that say, okay, this is sushi grade. But the food that goes to cans, I think, it's my impression, that food is lost, that it's beyond that stage, and by that point it's already hopeless. Now, it doesn't need Bishul Yisroel. I mean, that reason, that svara
doesn't apply.
Sushi, I'm not so sure that, we like to think maybe it's very fresh, but I'm not so sure that we're eating it fresh off the boat either. I think that the sushi that we do eat raw is frozen in huge fillets and we eat it at a later time.
Okay, so you might be right about that. Okay, there are other reasons, if you want, we talk about that. There's other reasons why the fact that people eat sushi might not be enough to be matter. Okay, another good reason is that most people, there is such a thing as people literally eat spoonfuls of raw fish. Okay, but most people who eat sushi are eating food item that in it has a certain percentage of raw fish. That is to say, the raw fish has a certain taste that you would not eat by itself, but as an ingredient in a bigger food, as an ingredient in a bigger food, you're willing to handle it. Okay, and yes, depending on that Magen Avraham. So that you're right also. There is people eat sashimi, but that's not nearly popular enough to say that's what people eat. I'm not saying I'm not questioning what you like to eat. But
I don't like it personally.
Okay.
But certainly it would qualify for the ritzvah, meaning it's a roiler chai.
It depends. So that depends on how you learn a shach. Okay, we're not talking about that. There's a shach about how you learn whether that makes it roiler to be nechachai or not. If some people eat it, we're not going to talk about it.
Just a clarification. We were speaking about moose and the kolel, the fact that you do have eggs raw when it comes in the form of moose. But nobody ever eats the egg raw. We asked somebody and they said if that's the case then it should be fine. It is nefachah. But it's never eaten raw. It's eaten with chocolate or with other ingredients inside of it. So I'm just trying to understand, we're talking about the fact that raw fish is only going to be included with other ingredients, then do we pass them that it has to be eaten by itself raw? Like at the end of the day, I know there's a book about it. Do we pass them that at the end of the day that it has to be eaten by itself raw, or it can be with other ingredients? Right?
I don't remember. I know it depends on the Magen Avraham. I don't remember offhand what it is. And I told him when he asked the question about the eggs. Okay, so I told him that my shear is up to halacha. Where are we at? We're in Yud Gimel. Okay, and eggs is in halacha Yudal. So I told him that I'm going to think about it more when I get to halacha Yudal.
We asked Chef last week; he was not buying it.
Because?
You say we don't pass him the Magen Avraham.
He basically didn't follow that. He didn't hear that Magen Avraham at all.
Okay, I don't remember, and I told him when I get to Yudal, I'll think about it more. Right, I'm finishing Yud Gimel. Okay.
All right, we got to get to houses.
Right. So, do you want to do houses? Or do you want me to go home?
Definitely.
Okay.
No.
That's
We'll do.
one thing
Good.
about the sushi, but the fish is the ikar in
Okay.
the sushi. So the fact that it's eaten only with things, the other thing is stuff that people eat the sushi because of the fish, not because of the rice. So therefore, it's nechachai.
Okay, so there's a question whether people eat it, and as far as nechachai, would you eat it if I gave you a whole plateful of just raw fish, would you eat it? Or do you say, I can handle that taste as part of a bigger food? I'll give you another example. There's salads that have raw potatoes in them. Sliced up raw potatoes cut into them. So does that mean that potatoes are edible raw? You say no. Potatoes, really, you can't eat them raw. If you bit into potato, you'd spit it out. But as that unusual taste of this raw, hard potato as part of a bigger salad, that tastes good. That I could take it. As part of a bigger, I could take it. And over here, so okay, that's a question where... Okay, that's a... maybe I'm not qualified because I don't eat sushi. But that's exactly what the Magen Avraham was told on that onions, the same thing. Same question on onions. I don't remember. I know that it's dependent on the Magen Avraham. I don't remember of it. Okay, let's go to houses. Okay. Okay. One question that's very much related to houses, more than it's related to food service. It is relevant there, but it's mostly related to houses. Is whether bishul akum, bishul by somebody who's not religious, counts as bishul Yisroel. There's quite a shaila in the poskim whether a Jewish person who's not Sherm Shabbos, whether that person's bishul is considered bishul Yisroel or not. Okay. Most people are makel about that child that it is considered bishul Yisroel. We're not going to talk about that. But what the main issue is that even though his bishul might be bishul Yisroel, I can't trust the person to have made the food bishul Yisroel. Okay. And my example for that is, I walked into it's a little factory, call it like a mom and pop operation, and as I walked in, I said to the mashgiach, is the food that we're going to see bishul Yisroel? Before we walked in, I said, is it bishul Yisroel? He said, yes. Because the owner, Howie, who owns the place, lights all the fires. He does all the cooking. There are lots of people who are not Jewish there. Howie, who's not religious, he lights the fires. He does all the cooking in the place. I said, okay, fine. Now I know what I'm getting myself into. And we walk in, and we say, we schmooze a little bit, and how's it going? And then and say something about his cooking. He says, no, I used to be doing cooking. Things have gotten really busy now. And I'm busy with this and that and the other thing. So Maria does some of the cooking. So she's also the one who turns on the fire sometimes because it's gotten busy. What is he saying? It's what the Gemara says. To him, it's not important. He doesn't keep kosher in his house. To him, it's not important that the food should be bishul Yisroel. So it's possible that when he gets busy, he'll let Maria light the fire. Okay, now in this case, he was honest and told you the truth, because to him, it's not important. He does not Sherm Shabbos. He doesn't keep kosher, so to him, it's not important. So he might be able to make bishul Yisroel, but he has no nemonis that the food is bishul Yisroel. Okay, we can't have him as the person. If we have a kitchen with 5 people in it, we can't say Howie, who's Jewish, is the one who's responsible for bishul Yisroel, because if he doesn't keep kosher himself, he can't be responsible for it. He has no nemonis to say that in fact he made a bishul Yisroel. But that's very different in the house. In a house, if my housekeeper is an old Russian lady who's Jewish, but she's not at all religious, she doesn't keep kosher, okay, or she's a Jewish person who I know doesn't keep kosher, but there's no question that she did the cooking. I mean, if she made the supper, who do we think? She brought in her friends from outside to do cooking. She's the person in the house. So that's the one case where you could say, and there are many who are makel, who say that cooking by someone who's Jewish, who's not religious, is considered bishul Yisroel, in which case, that would solve your problem. It's like saying we have a mashgiach in our house. The only person who can do the cooking is either the family, they keep kosher, or this not religious person who's Jewish, that make the food bishul Yisroel. So in a house is a singular case where you could be samech on this kula to say that cooking by someone who's not religious is bishul Yisroel. Okay, that's like a very, in my mind, unusual case, but potentially it would be mutter. We're not talking about the many places we talked about it. Most were makel. Okay, so that's good news, so to speak. Okay. We had mentioned beforehand about lighting ovens with what we call the shade machine, guys doing it by phone. Okay. Now, in factories, it's a special system put in by this person, Shane. Okay. Nowadays, things have become much more popular or common that people light their fires over the internet. Okay. There's such a thing as turning on your fires to cook. People have built systems for that. Yeah, because for people, that is to say, for people who don't have a housekeeper, they want to cook supper. Okay, they're off at work, so they remotely turn their things on. They put all the food into the oven, and they turn on remote. There's systems people have built to do this that you can control your appliances remotely.
You say in the basement, you want to preheat the oven?
Right, well, that's for the really lazy people. But it's meant for people who are away. It's meant for people who are not home and want to turn something on. Well, we're going to be home late. So we set the oven to go on based on, when we leave the office or something. Okay? So you can control your heat, you control different things. So that potentially, that means is even if there's a housekeeper in the house who's not Jewish, who can't make the food Bishul Yisroel, potentially the Yid could light things. But then we would need, this is where I was going to say what Rabbi Brand said, which is we need to control that they actually don't do things by themselves. Okay? Then we need a webcam. Okay, look how modern we are, so that we can do this thing. We need a webcam that can tell us that they don't touch the fires. Okay, so someone just put a little camera, just like people have cameras to watch that they don't strangle their kids. Okay, they have cameras in the kitchen to say that they don't turn on the fires. Okay, and while I'm here, I'll mention having the webcam is a huge mile for a very different thing. Okay, we're only at this is the very beginning of Chelik Beis, but if you go to Siman Kuf Yud Ches, you find out that you're not allowed to leave somebody who's not Jewish alone with your kelim. Okay, you're not allowed to leave somebody with your pots. Forget about Bishalakim because they might make you things treif. Okay, so you have food available in the house, you can't leave your kelim around. Okay, that's a serious issue also. I think it's a Kuf Yud Ches, a very serious issue. So having webcams is a way of solving that problem also. See, the person can stay at home. You tell them don't use anything in the kitchen. They know you're not showing up for another 5 hours. Right? You're off at work. You never show up before 6. But the webcam gives you all control that I know they don't do anything in the kitchen because I have it rigged up that I can see what goes on in my kitchen, even when I'm not there.
Also, since there might be webcam, they might be scared to do it.
Well,
just the period that there might be webcam.
Okay, so that only works. That only works till the first time they do it, and nobody says a thing, right? Then they know good and well that nobody's, no one knows.
There's no webcam.
But I'm going to sit there and watch the 5 hours of videos.
Okay, so what there is if you want to apply this, there are people who make cameras that only record when something changes. Okay, we use it. I believe we use it in a cheese place, where we have a place where there's a room that the people are not allowed to go into the room without the rabbi being there. Okay, but the problem is, for whatever reason why they're not supposed to be able to go into there, the problem is they need to go into there like once a day to do something, to move cheeses around, to turn the cheeses. So what do we do? Send them mashgiach every time to go out to nowhere to go watch them turn the cheeses? So it's not realistic. So the arrangement we came up with is that there's a camera in the room. If they want to go to the room, they tell us before, and we're going into the room at 12 o'clock. We're going to turn the cheeses, and that's fine. And then someone can either watch it live, or I think that camera has. But there is such a thing, surely, is that it only records when something changes. So you know what that room, you know what the video looks like? Nothing. It's just an empty room. That's all. It just sits there. The cheeses are just sitting there. And when something changes, when the guy walks in, you see it change. What?
Very exciting video.
Well, yeah, it gets light and dark. That's what it does. No, so if thing records only when something changes, that means is when someone walks into the kitchen to get an apple out of the refrigerator, it'll go on. But the rest of the day, when no one's in the kitchen, it'll just be a quiet video. And I have to say something, like he said, the issue here is the mirrors. They know that you can see what's going on, but that requires you to call once in a while and say, hey, what was going on over there? I saw you schmoozing with your friend for half an hour yesterday. Just something that someone knows that you are watching the video. Something that, what was that you were doing over there? Just keeps them aware that you're watching. That creates the mirrors. Okay. So now, another thing that some people use is something we sort of talked about in passing, which is they keep their appliances on, they keep them on low. Okay? If a person turns on the oven in the morning and says, you're going to make supper, this person's going to cook the supper, I'll put on my oven and leave it on low, then, again, if you have control that they don't actually turn it off, then the food that they stick into the oven later on will be Bishul Yisroel. You lit the fire in the morning, when they want to cook, they'll turn it up to the right temperature, but when you lit it in the morning, you had it lit on something, so that's enough to make the food Bishul Yisroel. Okay, we're not talking about the temperatures. For most people, the nafkamin is, in a home situation, doesn't make a difference. If you put it on low, you've gotten it warm enough that everyone will hold it. It's warm enough to say Bishul Yisroel. Okay, and in that vein, I'm going to mention something that's so unusual. You'll probably never see it in your life, but it's just so unusual. I'll have to say it. Okay, there's a company that makes. We talked about before cooking with convection. Okay, and I forgot. There's 3 ways to cook food. One is convection, and one is radiation, and one is, I forgot what the third one is. There's 3 ways to cook it. This company has this oven it's this huge oven. The oven weighs hundreds of pounds, this oven. Okay, it's a cast iron oven. You light the oven once, and you never turn it off. Okay, and what happens is, it heats by radiation, I think it's called. I forgot what it's called. What happens is, the metal in this oven gets hot, and it's constructed in a way that this chamber, there's no dial on this oven either. You can't make it higher or lower. This chamber is constructed in a way that its walls are always 350, or the equivalent of 350. This chamber is the warming chamber. This is the medium chamber. There's different chambers, and they're always hot and they're always on. and you just put your food in, and it's supposed to cook your food amazing, do wonderful things for your food. Okay? It does wonderful things for your electric bill also. Okay? This it's on all the time. Okay? And it doesn't work if you live in a hot place because you'll kill you. I mean, it's stifling. And the thing is always on all the time. But it's great for Bishul Yisroel because it means you can't turn the fire off, you can't turn it on, you can't turn it off, you can't make it hot, you can't make it low, you can't do anything. Everything is, you stove that, everything is on. You lit it once and that's it. It never gets lit again. Except they do service once a year, that's it. Otherwise it just sits there. You can't kasher. I don't know. A horror. Think about how to kasher. But it means if you had one of these ovens, you have to. If you ever have it, you have to have your house built specially because most floors can't support this oven. It's so heavy. Okay, so if you have this oven, then you have a permanent Bishul Yisroel. As long as you did it the first time, then it's Bishul Yisroel forever.
How many cases do you have? How many people have this oven?
Oh, somebody must own it. I know about it for whatever my connection to it. Especially, I don't know any from people who own this oven. No, I don't. But if they did, it would be Bishul Yisroel. Okay. And the same idea is there are people who cook like in a crock pot. Okay? There are people who I think of crock pots. Most people think of crock pots as a way to cook chunks for Shabbos. Okay, but they didn't make it as much as we believe they did. But they didn't make crock pots to cook on Shabbos. Crock pot is for people who want to go to work in the morning and come back to their supper already cooked. So of course that would make it Bishul. But that's essentially the Yiddish cooking. Okay. One last thing I want to talk about is there's a newer way of cooking. It's used a little bit in food service, but it's really only used at home. It's an interesting shiloh to it. It's called an induction heater. Okay, an induction oven that cooks by induction is, I don't know what the technology is, but what I know is that there's, so to speak, a coil. There's something in there that generates the electricity. It's not generating traditional heat. It's doing something with electricity. Covered by a surface, and when certain pots are put onto it, the electricity passes through from the coil straight into the food. Okay? And it's only into the pot. Okay? It doesn't. The surface itself doesn't get hot. The surface only gets hot because there's a hot pot sitting on top of it. So there's a little bit of heat leaks into it, and the surface gets a little warm. Okay? But the fire, so to speak, fire itself does not get hot. Okay? It's cooking without heat. If you put down the wrong pot onto it, the pot made out of the wrong materials, it doesn't heat up at all. If you put your hand onto it, it doesn't heat up at all. Okay, so if a kid touches it, he can't burn himself because there's no heat. It's on, but it doesn't generate any heat unless the right kind of pot is on top of it, the right type of metal is on top of it. Okay? So I don't know what the technology is, okay? But whatever it is, it works. It's something called induction, and it's a safety feature. It's very efficient because as soon as you pick up the pot, it goes off. It doesn't go off. It actually goes off. But it doesn't go off because there's nothing to go on. It only heats up when you put something onto it. In other words, the electricity is waiting, but until you put the right pot onto it, until it's the right shidduch, it doesn't go on. It doesn't do anything. And even when it goes on, it's not hot. It's not that the coil is getting hot. Somehow it's passing electricity or something through, and it makes it heat up. Okay? So it would seem, now, if that needed Bishul Yisroel, it would be very difficult, because the Yid would have to put the pot on every time. There isn't any way to turn. You can't say I turned it on in the morning. You can't turn it on. There's nothing. It doesn't turn on. Okay, it turns on, but it doesn't. Nothing gets hot. So, but the simple understanding is that food does not need Bishul Yisroel. The food cooked like that is not Bishul Yisroel. Just like we said before about microwaves, and just like we said before about cooking without heat, you're essentially cooking this food. That the food gets hot. If you put a pot with water and eggs in it, the water will start bubbling because you are cooking up the water and the eggs are getting cooked like that. But the water is being cooked by getting hot, but not through a flame. Okay, the Ramos words are, if there's no fire, there's no bishlock. Okay, so this is another, so to speak, another version of a microwave. When you cook something in a microwave, the food gets hot also, but there's no flame that's cooking it up. We don't see any reason why that should be also. Okay, it doesn't see any reason. It cooks in the same way that food cooks if it's cooked with a fire, but it doesn't cook in the way that. So I'll take that back. If you held that cooking with steam needed Bishul Yisroel, maybe this would need Bishul Yisroel. Okay, the thing is, most people are making about cooking with live steam. This seems to be cooking with heat without any fire involved. That's what goes on. There's no fire to speak of. When you take it off, it's not hot. Therefore, it doesn't need Bishul Yisroel. I'll mention two other shilos to throw off the induction heater while I'm here. One is that kashering that surface is very difficult. Okay, there's no way to heat up the surface. Right? You can't heat up the surface to kasher with it. On the other hand, the bleed that happens on the surface only happens through irui. Okay, if you think about it, on your stovetop, if a food drops down, the food is irui, but it's pulling irui onto a hot surface. Okay? If food drops out of your pot over here, it drops onto a cold surface. The stovetop is cold. If the stovetop has any heat, it's just heat that leaked out of the pot. The pot, a little heat spreads from the pot. But basically, it's a big irui. So basically, you're going to kasher it the way you kasher your counter or your tabletop. Okay? The surface has blias through irui. The Shulchan Aruch says surfaces like that you should kasher with irui. It's better if you can't use an Evan Belubenis. Okay, in this case, you may be actually able to do that by putting a hot pot onto it or something. Maybe you could do it in Evan Belubenis, but if you can, fine. If not, then that's okay. You just do irui because that's the way the blia happens through irui. If it's glass, the top, then you're going to be up the creek. Okay, if the top is glass, which I think it often is, if the cover is glass, we don't kasher glass. So that's not good. Then you're going to be up the creek.
Get a second top. I'll drop a replacement.
Okay, if that's possible, then that's fine. Then you could.
So we have a glass stovetop at home. We have a separate one for Pesach.
Right. So if you can do that, right, that's fine. Now, the last shaila that there is for the induction oven is for Shabbos. Okay. The problem is that first of all, I don't believe that you can use a blech on it. Okay. I don't believe you can use a blech because then you won't get your heat conducting through unless the blech is made out of the right materials. But I don't think you can use a blech on it. Okay, but that's okay. That's okay. We hold we make like the second sheet to Rama if the food is cooked. You can leave it on without a blech, so that would be okay. But the problem is you can't take the pot off the fire because when you take the pot off the fire, you just turn the fire off. Okay, so that's quite a problem because most people you now take the food out of the pot either because that would be making also. So you're sort of stuck. You could look at the fire, you could watch your shalom cook, but I haven't figured out yet how do you get the food off the fire on Shabbos. Now maybe, I should say impossible, maybe it could be that it cycles on and off. It could, I don't know if this is true. If it cycles off, if you could tell that the electricity is not flowing through now, I don't know if it does that. If you could tell, you'd be able to quickly get it off while that was happening. But otherwise, I don't see how you're going to get the food off the fire because when you do it, you basically you're turning off the electricity. Whatever you're doing, something you're doing. So that causes a problem for Shabbos. Okay, I'm out of things to say.
Rabosai, we have such a car to talk to my